Hi, welcome to this month's client video. I thought I would address a fairly topical matter that you've maybe been reading about in the news that happened in June. So you may or may not have heard of this, depending on how much you're following things, but there was a fairly significant stock market listing on the 12th of June, Elon Musk's company. It came to the markets at last, and it seemed like it was the latest hot stock to invest in. Everybody wanted to get their hands on Elon Musk's company, SpaceX. And it's at times like this that the reminder is for you as clients of mine and investors in the global markets is that you do not need to be preoccupied with, should we be investing in this? Should we not be investing in this? By the very nature of the portfolios that I help create for you, you will become an investor in SpaceX by default. However, you will not have all your eggs in one basket. You will not become a direct shareholder in SpaceX and subject to heavy price volatility, because in doing that, we're making a speculation about the prospects of one company, and that is never sensible. So a bit of education first of all. SpaceX in its current form is very new to us. We've just become subject to it. It's become very much in fashion. And on the 12th of June, there was what's called an initial public offering whereby SpaceX's shares would become available to the general marketplace. Now, the important thing here is that in various iterations in the past, the actual company, which SpaceX is, has been in the mix for a number of years now. It's almost been 20 years actually. And the company previously had been privately held, so it would have been held by certain directors within the company, senior employees, and now it's moved to the public markets where you and I and other end investors have the opportunity to become a shareholder. And as you can see here in the Financial Times, there was lots of articles about this. Even in mainstream media and BBC, there was chat about the initial public offering, how Elon Musk was going to become the world's richest person by a significant margin overnight. This is the biggest initial public offering of all time. And naturally, you're probably starting to think, should I be jumping on the bus? What if I get left behind? The rhetoric builds, the FOMO builds. And I would say to you at times like these is just take a step back and not become too preoccupied with it. And indeed, we can even see that in the number of weeks since the initial public offering came to the market, there was, of course, this spike in demand because people think it's the latest hot thing, we should be chasing it. And similarly, there's been a taper off there on in as the market starts to take the heat out of the speculation and all of the drive and the fashion that appears to be with this new hot stock. Things normalize. Now, where SpaceX will go from here, obviously, I do not know. We can look at how the performance has done over the last month, roughly, since it came to the markets. And we can see, as is normal with things like these, when a large IPO comes to the market, there's a high spike in demand, and then things start to taper off. Now, will SpaceX be a good stock in the long term? Here's my prediction. I do not know. And anyone that says they do know is lying to both themselves and to you. We do not know how individual stocks will perform. And that is why we do not hedge our bets into single company shares. That is why the portfolios that you invest in with me as your financial advisor, they are globally diversified. And by extension of that, you will start to hold some holdings in SpaceX, albeit much smaller than if you held the stock directly. So you will not be subject to this great levels of volatility that we've seen over the last few weeks, because things start to normalize out. When you hold a globally diversified fund, you'll have a sliver of SpaceX within your portfolio. However, it's not going to be of such a tangible size that suddenly it's going to compromise your ability to meet your financial life goals, your retirement plans, or whatever the goals you have for your financial future that we obviously discuss in your planning meetings. So we don't know how SpaceX is going to perform, but the key thing to take away here is over time you will start to become a shareholder in SpaceX. You don't need to worry that you're missing the bus. You don't need to feel like you're on the outside looking in. You don't need to have the FOMO, because over time the funds that you're invested in, that I put you in as my clients, they will be tracking indices that start to mirror some of the indices that will hold weightings in SpaceX. And many have already added SpaceX into their listings. There's been a slight pushback from the S&P 500, which basically is saying that until SpaceX is profitable, it will not be included in its index. So the bottom line is, over time, you'll probably start to get a drip feed allocation into SpaceX, but it's not going to be significant and it's not going to happen overnight, because at the moment a lot of this is just speculation about where the company might go in the future. Anything or anytime when we look at things like this graph and we're looking at how the volatility of the price is changing, this is all just based on expectations, on financial news, on what people are anticipating. It's got very little relevance to the underlying profitability of SpaceX. But that is why we do not become concerned with what we read in the media, with short-term share price fluctuations, is because it's often got no bearing at all on whether or not it's a good stock to be invested in or not. So what you need to take away from this is there's lots of stuff you'll be reading in the never-ending worry service that is the news at the moment. It was rife back in June because nearly every newspaper outlet and their dog was saying that this was this beautiful salvation for your retirement plans, because suddenly you could become a shareholder in the world's most profitable company. But we do not put all our eggs in one basket. As we've seen, the share price can dip. Indeed, it has since it opened. So what we need to know is, globally diversified investors like you as my client, and of course me, because I invest in the exact same strategies that I use for my clients, what we know is that over time we will become shareholders in SpaceX, but not to the extent that we need to become overly preoccupied with variations in the share price. We just need to let global markets do their thing. And there's an education piece here as well, that as these larger tech giants come to the market, there's likely going to be similar IPOs from other firms, particularly in the AI space. There's going to be lots of news about this, but we just need to take a step back, remember the fundamentals, that we're structuring our portfolios in a globally diversified way. We become immune to market noise, and that will win out over the longer term. And I'll just share, last of all, this graphic that I absolutely love. We're talking about the fact that you don't need to pick the winners. If we look over the last 10 years, we can see how the typically biggest companies have come to the fore in each of these years. Who were the big players? Obviously, you can see the brands you will know here: Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, which own Google. We've got Meta, Facebook. Some of these names you will recognize, some of these names you won't. Important point to remember here is, when you're investing in the stock market, it's not as scary as it might sound. You're investing in real companies that develop real services to real people, household names that you use on a daily basis. That's all that we're doing when we're investing in the stock market. But each year, the makeup of the top 10 or whatever will vary. Some will drop out, some will come to the fore. And the bottom line is, you don't need to worry about picking the winners. You don't need to worry about who's going to be the next beast. Obviously, had you predicted 20 years ago that Apple was a good stock to invest in, you would have done extremely well. But think about the 99% of other names that didn't come to the fore. The 99% of other names that would have compromised your retirement plans. We can't pick the winners, but you don't need to if you're a globally diversified investor. So anything you're reading about SpaceX at the moment, I would really encourage you, just don't stress about it. Don't stress. Your portfolio is set up in a way that we will have an allocation to this, but we do not need to become preoccupied and concerned about all of the negativity, the positivity, whatever the flavor of the month is around SpaceX that you'll be reading in the Financial Times or the Sunday Times, or if you're reading anything at all in the financial markets. You really don't need to become concerned with it. So hopefully that has given you a little bit of peace of mind. Tune out the noise is what I always say to you. The best investors are those that do the least amount of activity. Ideally, bin your logins to your investment platform if you can. Ideally, you would understand the value of your portfolio when we have our annual planning meetings and nothing in between, and that, more often than not, leads to the greatest results. So I hope that's been helpful. I hope you're having a good summer so far. I'll see you next month, and once again, thank you for your time. See you soon. Bye.